So I am a medical fellow and you people are technical field, and it is always a great learning experience and for all the parties involved. So as the topic has already been told, I will make a confession right in the beginning that I have heard and then learned a little bit about cognitive load theory for the first time when this topic was given to me. But as always, any new knowledge, any learning is important. And being a neuroscientist and a neurologist, cognitive functions are a very important part of my practice. So cognitive load theory uh, is also interesting and informative and useful for me to learn. However, I will not know the details and the nuances of this theory, but I will try to apply it to the field of aphasia. My outline is that initial 20 minutes or so I will devote to what is aphasia, how is it assessed, and what are the various impairments, and what are the theoretical therapeutic approaches which are divided into biological and behavioral. I will explain that. The next 20 minutes or so I will devote on the theories underlying the therapeutic approaches for aphasia, applications of cognitive load theory in aphasiology, and non-applications and limitations of cognitive load theory in aphasiology. And in the last 10-15 minutes, I will make a call for computer and information technology professionals, that is you people, what sort of interaction and what sort of help I might need. So aphasia is a new sub-term or a new word for many of you. It is part of many disorders of speech and communication. Disorders of speech and communication can be developmental and can be acquired. The developmental ones are mental retardation, congenital deaf mutism, dyslexia, stammering, stuttering, and some of you might have seen the movie The King's Speech, and many more of you might have seen the Tare Zameen Par. So they are dealing with stuttering and dyslexia. Both of them are disorders of speech and communication, but they are developmental disorder. And I'm not talking about them today. What I'm talking about is aphasia. The disorders of speech, language, and communication are very heterogeneous. Aphasia is only one of them. They can be disorders of phonation. They can be disorders of articulation, dysarthria, disorders of fluency, that is stammering, and finally the disorder of language where the aphasia is. How do we define? It's an impairment of language affecting the production or comprehension or both, and also the ability to read or write. It is always due to injury to the brain and particularly the cerebral cortex, not the lower part of the brain. Most commonly from a stroke, particularly in older individuals. It can occur in young also. Brain injuries resulting in aphasia can also occur from head trauma, brain tumor, and infections. Any pathology in the brain. It can be very severe to mild. It can affect only a single aspect of language use or many, and it affects multiple aspects of communication. And it is the job of we, the professionals, to evaluate them in detail. Why this subject is important? It is common. There might be about 3 to 4 million persons suffering from aphasia in India. It is chronically disabling. There is a huge treatment gap. What do you mean by treatment gap? That means a lot can be done with good scientific evidence, but is not being given, is not available to persons suffering from aphasia. So that's an irony. And it is the primary responsibility of speech language pathologists and neurologists to diagnose them, to give them therapy, to help them in rehabilitation, to advocate for them, to educate people around it, and to do the research. So many responsibilities are there, and your help, the help from computer and software professionals will be needed. So as I said, regarding severity, it can be very mild and subtle to very severe. In neurology, it can affect the motor part of communication, that is efferent or expressive, and it can affect the input part, that is afferent and comprehension, and both. Amongst the modalities which can be affected by aphasia can be verbal modality, that means the way I am speaking and the way you are listening and understanding. It can affect the written modality, that means when I read and write, that is also part of speech and communication. Even the sign language, that can also be affected. Articulation alone can be affected, which is called as dysarthria. And then at linguistic level, the aphasia can affect phonology, that is the sound patterns, semantics, that means the lexicon, the words and their meanings, syntax, that means the grammar and sentences, and discourse means the paragraph and longer conversations and longer monologues. So all levels of linguistics can be affected, and many other higher mental functions carried by the brain can also be affected in persons with aphasia, like memory and executive functions and recognizing functions. So those things can also, the scope of aphasia is very wide. Just to arouse your interest, there are some films about aphasia, and I would urge you that you can take a snapshot for this slide so that you can search the films about aphasia. The titles are The Possibilities Are Endless, Afterwards, The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, Aphasia, and Picturing Aphasia. And I would also recommend those who are fond of reading this book by Diane Ackerman, 100 Names for Love. One day, Ackerman's husband Paul West, an exceptionally gifted wordsmith with intellectual, suffered a terrible stroke. When he regained awareness, he was afflicted with aphasia, loss of language, and he could utter only a single syllable, ma'am, ma'am, ma'am. The standard therapies yielded little result but frustration. Diane soon found, however, that by harnessing their deep knowledge of each other and her own scientific understanding of language and the brain, she could guide Paul back to the world of words. This triumphant book is both a humane and revealing addition to the medical literature on stroke and aphasia, and also an exquisitely written love story, a magnificent addition to the literature. The assessment of aphasia is done by speech language pathologists, we the neurologists and clinical psychologists. And what do? We talk, we listen, we take notes, we take audio video recordings, we replay them, we transcribe all that audio video recording for offline analysis, and we use many stimuli while talking and testing the person with aphasia. We use picture cards, printed cards, images, and then we analyze the responses. When do we suspect aphasia? Whenever a patient with a stroke occurs, because about 25 to 30% of survivors of a stroke have aphasia. About 10 to 20% survivors of traumatic brain injury will have aphasia. Almost all patients with dementia will have language-related problem and any other cerebral pathology. Before we embark on a detailed assessment of aphasia, we of course take history from the family and patient. We ask for the handedness. Most of the people are right-handed, but 10% are left-handed, and it has a bearing on dominance or cerebral organization of the language in the brain. We inquire how many languages are known by the person with aphasia, the education, the occupation, the rest of the neurological and medical status, and the psychosocial background. We also think about whether our assessment is formal or informal. Most often on the bedside or in a busy OPD in a hospital, our assessments are brief and informal. But ideally speaking, good assessment is formal. And what do we mean by formal? Standardization. Whatever battery, whatever protocol we are using should be standardized, should be reliable, should be valid, not ad hoc. So that's another issue. And there are large number of popular test batteries and methods are available. Some are only for bedside examination, some are for screening, very brief assessment, some are very comprehensive, some are dealing with only specific aspect of the language behavior. So large number of batteries are available all over the world, less so in India, less so in Indian languages, but they are becoming available. Articulation or pronunciation is also part of our assessment, and we call it dysarthria. And there are many types of dysarthria. And we take the audio files, audio samples of these voice, which can be analyzed for spectral analysis, and there are many aspects of computerized analysis of disordered pronunciation of a person with aphasia. So a lot of scope of interaction between the clinicians and the computer professionals. Because we doctors often are busy, we most often do a brief screening test. One of the popular one is Franchise aphasia screening test, which has been now developed into 5 Indian languages. IIT Indore has developed another screening test, HACCP Hindi aphasia screening Indore test, and which can be administered in about 10 minutes time. But what is really needed is a detailed, comprehensive assessment of aphasia, and I will be devoting around few minutes. Why is it important and how is it done? Number one, we look at the verbal expression. How does a person talk? And our methods of eliciting verbal expression are conversation, narration, picture description. And when we stimulate a person to speak and speak and speak, what do we look at? We look at the fluency, the vocabulary, the word finding difficulty, wrong words being used, whether they are adequate, whether the description is adequate, how is the morphology of the language, how is the grammar, sentences, and discourse. And we have created many sets of scenes and comic strips for description. These are used to stimulate, to provoke, to urge, to nudge a person with aphasia to speak. It's a difficult job, but it has to be done. Otherwise, you won't get an adequate sample of speech. So our artists have created large number of comic strips, and we want them. And we have normative data from healthy people. And I will show a couple of videos.
त्रिकोण ये और चौकोर ये छोटा लड़का ये बड़ा लड़का.
This is a normal fellow.
So
He is doing well.
Correctly point to the various words.
Now this is automatic
इस
sequence.
सप्ताह में जितने दिन होते हैं उन सबके नाम बोल के बताओ.
This is relatively preserved and a simple task in persons with aphasia because these are overlapped.
हाँ बोलते जाओ. एक सप्ताह में.
Now this is category naming. So I asked him to name how many types of animals are
कुछ
there.
पालतू होते हैं, कुछ जंगली होते हैं. हाँ कुत्ता.
Is my audio audible?
जाओ फटाफट और बोलो.
From the videos. Dr. Vivas, is the audio of the video audible?
बोला नहीं जाता. नाम तो पता है. बोलो शेर. और बताओ जल्दी.
Now this is command
आंखें
comprehension.
बंद करो.
I give him some command and see whether he follows or
आंख
not.
खोलो. आंख खोलो. बालों पर हाथ
Persons
लगाओ.
with aphasia fail to obey many commands.
आपकी जेब से पेन निकालकर टेबल पर रख दो. आपकी जेब का पेन टेबल पर रख दो. टेबल पर रख दो.
Fails to understand.
He is making mistake. आंखें बंद करो. नाम पूछूंगा. आप कोशिश करना इनके नाम बताने की.
She is having a very severe aphasia. She won't be able to say anything.
आप इसका नाम बता सकती हो. ये क्या है?
भल्ला.
अच्छा. और ये क्या है?
भल्ला.
नहीं आ रहा आपको बोलते?
नहीं भल्ला.
अच्छा. और ये क्या है?
भल्ला.
There is a perseveration. Same and same response is coming. I am continuing with the same testing. अच्छा ये बताओ.
ये
क्या है? मालूम है तुमको?
हाँ.
इससे क्या करते हैं?
ये
हाँ. ये बच्चे उड़ाते हैं आकाश में.
हाँ.
देखा है तुमने उड़ाते हुए?
हाँ.
इसको क्या कहते हैं? बोलो. प
पा
पतंग.
पा
पतंग.
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 हाँ.
पता है ना पतंग? The naming is also continued with respect to color naming, with respect to the verbs. नाम पूछूं.
Another picture, patient with picture description.
सांप है. और क्या हो रहा है? हाँ.
देखिए पूरा नहीं।
हाँ, नहीं और बताओ, इसमें इसमें क्या घटना होगी? अगर ये काटता जाएगा तो क्या होगा?
जैसे ये ऊपर से आएगा ना,
क्यों आएगा ये?
ये जैसे ऊपर आ रहा है ना, इसके ऊपर से
हाँ
तो ये यहाँ से ऊपर आएगा ना,
हाँ
तो इसमें यहाँ काटेगा ये,
हाँ, और क्या हो सकता है इस चित्र के अंदर?
और यहाँ से ये बन जाएगा दूसरा, ये मतलब झाड़ जो है ना,
हाँ,
ये बन जाएगा इससे,
अच्छा फिर
इसलिए इसको यहीं रखा था इनको।
So there are many errors
इसको अलग रहने दो।
in describing.
इसमें तुम देख सकते हो ये आदमी कौन सी डाली को काट रहा है, कौन सी डाली को
His
काट रहा है।
attention is to be drawn towards the irony in the picture.
तो ये बुद्धिमानी का काम कर रहा है कि गलत काम कर रहा है?
नहीं, ये तो आदमी को अलग से करता है ना,
ये आदमी सही काम कर रहा है कि गलत काम कर रहा है?
नहीं, ये तो अलग करता है ना, क्योंकि आदमी अलग लगा ना, तो
गिर जाएगा क्या?
हाँ, ये आदमी करिए।
छोटी सी कहानी सुनाऊंगा, दो कहानियां सुनाऊंगा सरल सी।
These are all texts of picture description. Then there are auditory comprehension, in which we test whether the person is able to understand and follow our commands and stories or not. And then we ask them to repeat some words which can be simple and common to complex and rare. And then we ask them to repeat sentences which again can be complex to simple. And we should create a ready-made available and inventory of words and sentences to be repeated by the patients. Naming is a very important part of assessment of aphasia. We can ask them to name objects or pictures or body parts or people and figures and colors. And what do we look for? We look for success rate, latency, that is reaction time, percentage of errors, types of errors, and whether they are able to make a success after help or queuing. So all these things are looking at. We need to create and compile and carry a huge library of pictures and words and sentences which can't be chosen randomly. We have to pay attention to many parameters while creating those libraries, and we have to pay attention to frequency of that word, imageability and concreteness, pronounceability, the length of the word, number of syllables, and we have to standardize them and collect normative data while creating such collection of stimuli for assessment of aphasia. And once we create that collection, that compilation, there are multiple ways of using those words and picture. We will use them during auditory comprehension, during naming, during repetition, during reading aloud, during word picture matching, and during card matching and card sorting games. There are many uses. We have collection of nouns, and we can categorize the nouns into many semantic categories. And we have a collection of many action verbs, and we can categorize them into transitive, intransitive, with one agent, two agent, and we can have picture and sentence matching tasks in which you ask the person with aphasia, look at the picture, and out of the 4 options of sentences, which option is matching with the picture. We have a big list of words to be repeated, and we have a big list of non-words, the words which do not exist in our language. They are also, that judgment is to be done by the patient while reading, and they have to repeat it and they have to read it aloud. Reading is also part of aphasia assessment, and in this we ask them to recognize and differentiate the letters and words. We ask them to read aloud. We ask them to obey written commands and fill in the blanks in the written sentences. And many aspects of reading are done. For example, these are the fill in the blanks in the sentence, and there are 4 options to be filled in the empty space. So this is how we assess the reading comprehension. Same way, writing is assessed in great detail, and we also look at related higher mental functions. And certainly, working memory is also a part of higher mental functions. And I have learned that cognitive load theory is basically the premise is that the working memory is very short, very small, while the long-term memory can be much larger. And the constraint or the funneling effect or the tunneling effect is because of short working memory that can be affected in persons with aphasia, and many other aspects of higher mental functions like remote memory, attention, arousal, executive function, sensory perception, motor dexterity, visual spatial function. They should also be assessed. We also pay attention to functional communication. That means whatever be the assessment till now, that was known as impairment-based assessment. There is a dichotomy between what we do the assessment in our office and what the person in the actual life is able to communicate. And the actual communication in the day-to-day life is slightly better than what we really assess in the office or in the hospital. So because the communication in the actual life involves role playing, give and take, pause and participate, listen and respond, gesture and writing. So there are testing protocols for functional communication also. We also look at their narrative discourse, that if they have to narrate a story, their own story, some event in their life, and there are normative data, how to assess, how to give a scoring on the narrative discourse. Those things have also been taken care of in the assessment of person with aphasia. Quality of life rating scales have also been devised. So because of the stroke and because of aphasia, how the quality of life of the person has been affected, and there are big questionnaires. These questionnaires are administered to the caregivers and to the patient herself. Bilingualism and multilingualism is very common and almost normative in India. And in that case, we have to do the assessment in L1 and L2 and L3, whatever be the languages used and known and performed by the person with aphasia, we have to take into consideration the bilingualism. While doing all this, we the clinicians try to have the stimuli on our PC or laptop or smartphone. We try to get audio and video recordings so that we can get the conversation typed later in offline mode. And while administering these questions, we have to keep the recording pro forma ready. So the target word is there, the stimulus is there, and what was the patient's response. So we have to fill up all these things very rapidly. So that I comes to the end of the first part, the first 20 minutes of my presentation. Why have I devoted so much time on aphasia, on the methods of assessment? I will refer to them again briefly in the later part of my presentation for a very special purpose. A bit of theory. Theories underlying aphasia assessment. And it is dictated by the types or syndromes of aphasia which are considered less important nowadays. You might have heard some of the types of aphasia: Broca's aphasia, Wernicke's aphasia, global aphasia, and that diagnosis, that classification was based on three dichotomies: fluency, whether the aphasia is fluent or non-fluent; comprehension, whether the comprehension has been affected or not affected; and repetition, whether the repetition has been affected or not affected. However, over last 1 decade or so, aphasiologists have recognized that such type of pigeonholing or categorization is not very helpful. We should better describe the full profile. So if not traditional syndrome, then what? Then one of the options is cognitive neuropsychological model of language. I will not go into the details, but these are the alternative approaches to cognitive analysis which are based on two assumptions: transparency and modularity. It claims that deficits observed in aphasia are translatable into impairments in the function of specific modules of a normal functional architecture in the brain. And here is a diagram. I will not read the whole thing. This is known as one of the models, one of the options of cognitive neuropsychological model. Just look at the top. There is auditory input and there is a written input. So whenever we listen or read some word, how does it enter the brain? And there are many boxes and many arrows. So these are known as box and arrow models, and each node or each box is supposed to represent certain cognitive facility, and each arrow is supposed to represent transfer or overlap between the different nodes. Based on this model, our aphasia assessment can be modified, and a clinician is able to localize the lesion on this diagram. You might have heard this word, localization of the lesion. We the neurologists often talk of localization of lesion in the brain, and for that we do the CT scan and MRI and we say, oh, here is the lesion, here is the infarction, here is the hemorrhage. That is the anatomical localization. Right now, what I'm talking about localization is localization on this box and arrow diagram. That is also important. So our assessment should be able to diagnose where is the localization of lesion in terms of this model, in terms of this diagram. Then another model for reading function. And based on these models, many testing protocols have been developed. I will not go into their details. And there are limitations of these models also. Now I come to the second part, some methods of speech therapy for aphasia and what are the theories underlying them. These theories have been gradually evolving based on neurobiological and cognitive neuropsychological models, and our therapeutic approaches are based upon them. Therapeutic approaches are divided into two main parts, biological and behavioral. What do you mean by biological? Biological includes pharmacotherapy, that means the drugs. So we give certain medicines to the person with aphasia. The drugs do not work well. Whatever randomized control trials have been done on certain class of drugs have not yielded very encouraging results, except the fact that behavioral therapy, which is known as a speech language therapy, if given in combination of pharmacotherapy, the results are slightly better. So combination is good, pharmacotherapy alone is not good. Another biological approach is transcranial magnetic stimulation and transcranial direct current stimulation. So you apply powerful magnets on the right hemisphere, on the left hemisphere, and you change the polarity of the direct current, whether anodal or cathodal. These two methods are known as non-invasive brain stimulation. So you are stimulating parts of the brain either by magnetic field or by direct current. You are not invading in the brain. You are not making a hole in the skull and implanting the electrodes. This is from the outside. Creating a magnetic field over one hemisphere or other hemisphere and on a particular part of one hemisphere can change its polarity, can alter the currents flowing in that part of the brain, and both these methods can either facilitate the cerebral activity in that part or they can inhibit the activity in that part. And many beneficial effects of these two methods have been reported in last 1 decade in the form of randomized controlled trial. But overall, I would say the bulwark, the mainstay of therapeutic approaches is not biological but behavioral. And by behavioral, again, we divide them into two parts. The behavioral approaches, which are done not by neurologists, but they are done by speech language pathologists. They are divided into two main parts, impairment based and holistic or pragmatic. And these two approaches are not mutually exclusive, they are complementary to each other. And I will come to them in a brief. So, what is impairment based therapy? A few minutes back, I talked about cognitive neuropsychological model of box and arrows, and I said a good clinical assessment of a speech profile in a person with aphasia should be able to localize the lesion on one or more of the boxes and one or more of the arrows in a given case. And if we identify those impairments, we can tailor our therapy based on that. And for this, I have created this book, not only for speech language therapists, but also for caregivers. So the book is titled Home-Based Exercises for Person with Aphasia as a part of speech therapy. The same are administered by speech language therapists in their office practice. And these are the about 100 exercises and more under our preparation. So some are pertaining to auditory comprehension, some are pertaining to repetition, some are pertaining to naming, some are pertaining to sentence construction. So large number of exercises are there. This was all impairment based therapy. The second is holistic, pragmatic, behavioral part of the therapy. And in this, what happens? You do not pay that much attention to a narrow, specific impairment. You treat the person as a whole and you treat the overall facility, overall ability of communication in day-to-day life, pragmatic and holistic. One of the methods is music therapy, and it is called melodic intonation therapy. It's an evidence-based treatment which uses singing intonation to improve the expressive language in a person with aphasia, and it takes the advantage of non-damaged right hemisphere. So right hemisphere is controlling the music, the left hemisphere is controlling the language. Because aphasia is occurring due to damage to the left hemisphere, while the other hemisphere is still intact, because the musical ability is intact, we think that the melodic and rhythmic prosody with a slower rate of articulation and continuous voicing will reduce the dependence on the left hemisphere. So I think there was a video probably. No, I forgot to add that. Okay, doesn't matter. Then I come to another holistic therapy, which is a game therapy, which we developed at Indore in the form of a card matching game in a group of 4 persons, and we have developed a digital version of it also. I will show you 1 or 2 brief videos.
One sheep.
A person with aphasia is trying to describe the card and is trying to explain this to another fellow who is sitting across him.
और एक वर्ड मिल रहा है, एक वर्ड हाँ देख लीजिए क्या मिल रहा है, वो गोल गोल वाला,
It is round.
गोल हाँ हाँ वही बॉल खेलते हैं, हाँ वही कलर बताइए, कलर मैंने
The other fellow is guessing
ना
like dumb charades.
पीला हाँ हरा सफेद वाला सोच लीजिए
He is not able to describe the picture
Sure.
because he is having aphasia, and the fellow across him is also having aphasia, and they have to guess. The other fellow may or may not have that card, 50% chance. So this is how he succeeds. Another video, card exchange game or card matching game. He is trying to understand what is being asked of him. He may or may not have that card, 50% chance, and it's a big struggle. Don't show it. And it's an interesting game. The patients with aphasia love it. And it is a life participation approach. It is a pragmatic approach. It is not impairment based.
दुर्वेदी आपको कलर तो पूछना पड़ेगा ना, कलर तो पूछो उनसे कौन सा रंग है।
The speech therapist trying to help her. So out of so many cards, he has to pick up one and then he has to describe it.
चाबी घुमा रहे हैं अच्छे से रिफाइन करो।
उधर नहीं देखा था।
नहीं
आप मुंह से पूछो।
Don't show the card, just describe it.
फिर से
आपके पास चाबी ताला है,
क्या बना हुआ है, क्या खोल रहा है,
चाबी पे बना
चाबी
रहे
तो खोल रहा है, किसमें लगा रहा है।
And we have created a digital version of the same game with the name of Shabd Chitra, and it is in the testing mode right now. Another pragmatic therapy is life participation approach in aphasia. What we do here is that like you throw a boy or a baby in water with the hope that he will move the limbs and learn the swimming. Same way we encourage person with aphasia to come out of the shell, to come out of the isolation, to overcome the inferiority complex of not being able to communicate, to plunge into social situations of marriage and party and picnic and everything. So that stimulation, life participation is really helpful in the recovery of person. And we, the neurologist and speech therapist, are also having the responsibility of helping the person and family in rehabilitation with the help of occupational therapy. When our attempts at therapy have been exhausted, then our aim is to make best possible use of whatever competence has been acquired. Then we use augmentative and assistive modes of communication for daily life. That's also part of our therapy. We use communication boards or Samvad diary as an ad, communication ad for families in which there is a person with aphasia. So we can create such type of drawing sheets or copies in which the person can put the finger so as to describe his need. So if he puts his finger on the cup of tea here and he's wanting tea but he's not able to say cup of tea, he can put his finger. He can put his finger on the spectacle. And these type of communication diaries can be made digital also. And we have to harness the time, energy and skill of non-professionals also, the family members and others. Finally, I come to the theories underlying the therapeutic approaches, whether they can be applied to cognitive load theory and what can be the non-applications and limitations of cognitive load theory in aphasiology. In the last 40 years, cognitive neuroscience have arrived on the research stage, and it has revolutionized our concepts regarding the neural basis of cognition, including language processing. So, initially the language was solely explained in respect of the cognitive models, but now with the recent advances in neuroimaging, we have many more examples of neuroplasticity which are relevant to the recovery from aphasia. We have documented with the help of brain imaging that there are changes in the functional neural networks of the human brain without therapy and also with the help of therapy. We have documented that there are changes in the anatomy of the brain, in the gray matter and white matter as a result of therapy. And what does this neuroplasticity take shape? There can be homologous area adaptation. That means if the speech area in the left hemisphere has been damaged, the homologous area in the right hemisphere will take the function. There can be cross-modal assignment. If the verbal area is damaged but the reading area is intact, there would be a cross-modal reassignment. There can be map extension. If the verbal area was this large but a small part of it is damaged, the map can get extended and there can be compensation. So there are many forms of neuroplasticity which have been documented with the help of functional imaging. And what are the theoretical principles which have been understood about neural plasticity, which is applicable to not only language but to other cognitive functions? They are use it or lose it, use it and improve it. Specificity matters. That means what type of exercise is being given. It should be patient specific because each patient is different. Repetition matters, practice matters, intensity matters, and I put this in red because it has application to cognitive load theory. Time matters. Time is how many months and years after the damage to the brain. Salience matters. That means the stimuli and the training which you are giving, are they relevant to the patient's occupation and his job? Age of the patient matters. Transference matters. That means you give therapy in one mode, there is a transference to another modality, and occasionally there can be interference. So, when it comes to giving instructions to the caregivers and communication partners of a person with aphasia, those instructions are in concordance with cognitive load theory. What do we advise caregivers of a person with aphasia? Do not interrupt. Do not supply the word immediately. Speak in a quiet place. There should be no background noise. Control the amount of your own verbalization. Speak at a slow rate of 20 to 25 words per minute. Speak at a normal volume. Communicate with simple one-clause sentences. Use familiar and concrete nouns and verbs. Give limited information at a given time. So all these things are advised to the caregivers of a person with aphasia because we know the working memory is limited and it acts as a constraint. So this point is well taken. But the story in case of therapy-induced recovery, when a speech therapist is working hard with a person with aphasia, then there are exceptions. There are some methods of speech language therapy often practiced by the SLPs, they are not in concordance with cognitive load theory. There the intensity matters. And I will give some examples. One of them is known as errorless learning versus errorful learning. We do not allow any mistakes. We insist on error-free answers. It is a type of cognitive load, and it has been shown by many studies that errorless learning paradigm in aphasia therapy is better than errorful. I will not go into the details of the theory and methods. Another thing, there is something called constraint-induced aphasia therapy. What do we mean by constraint? We do not allow a person with aphasia to use methods of communication other than verbal. जो भी कहना बोल के कहो. No gestures, nothing. So if you restrict, if you constrain to him not to use the written mode, not to use the picture, not to use the gestures, only speak, speak, speak. It's a cognitive load. It's an example of higher cognitive load. And many randomized controlled trials have shown that continuous constraint-induced aphasia therapy gives you better results. This is a basic fundamental law behind all our methods, Hebb's law of synaptic plasticity. And it says that neurons that fire together wire together. So if you go on giving practice in a very intensive manner, you will recruit certain networks in a more strengthened manner. So like the neural networks in artificial intelligence can be taught to self-learn. They strengthen their nodes. That thing is occurring every day in our brain. So the Hebb's law was as old as 1940s, neurons that fire together wire together. I will also like to quote Eric Kandel, who got his Nobel Prize on memory function. As a young neuroscientist who was studying the learning and memory, Eric Kandel made a move that his colleagues considered suicidal. He switched his model of organism from cats to Mediterranean sea slug. This fateful decision led to a fundamental understanding of learning and memory. And what did he do? He identified a simple defensive reflex in the slug, similar to one of the human reflexes, where we quickly pull our hand away from a hot object. He showed that the slug could be taught to modify this reflex. The team identified the cellular mechanism, the neural circuitry, and what did he say? Kandel said, I could make the connection between them. I could stimulate a single neuron, sensory neuron, record the incoming signal in the motor neuron, one sensory neuron, one motor neuron, one modulatory neuron, and I reconstructed the whole neural circuit. So with this, he identified the mechanism of memory which are applicable to higher organisms. Another thing which has happened is advances in neuroimaging. In structural neuroimaging, we are able to show changes in the gray matter thickness, changes in the volume of cerebral gyri, changes in the gray matter density, changes in the white matter tract thickness, changes in the white matter bundle integrity. And that was structural imaging. And in functional imaging, we first put the patient into the MRI machine or PET scan machine, and we say, just relax, resting state. And there is a certain pattern of neural activity in the brain, and that is called default mode network. Then we ask the person to get engaged in some mental activity or specific tasks. The default mode network is changed, and it shows the changes in many things. It shows the changes in cerebral metabolism, cerebral blood flow, glucose uptake, glucose extraction, neurotransmitter uptake, neurotransmitter turnover. So these advances in structural and functional neuroimaging have shown a lot, and there is something called BOLD, blood oxygenation level dependent imaging. What happens? If you are engaged in a particular mental activity, certain part of the brain, neurons would fire more and would be more active. In those areas, the oxygen would be extracted more. That will alter the ratio of oxyhemoglobin to deoxyhemoglobin in that part of the brain. And the magnetization effect of oxyhemoglobin and deoxyhemoglobin are slightly different. And the patient is in a magnet. So it will show a change in the blood flow. BOLD, blood oxygenation level dependent imaging. And this is how that if you ask the person to solve an arithmetic problem, certain part of the brain will show the activation. If you ask him to recognize a musical raga, certain other part of the brain would be active. So this is how the neuroimaging is advancing our function. So this is the default mode network connectivity, and there are changes. These are the default mode areas are the nodes, and these nodes are connected by white matter bundles. To show these white matter bundles joining the different parts of the brain, there is something called diffusion tensor imaging, DTI. And how does it work? Very interesting. It works on the orientation of the hydrogen protons because the water molecule is having hydrogen, and the water molecules are normally in a random situation. But if you put a magnet around the head, they become oriented along the magnetic field. But the degree or the freedom of their orientation is constrained by the anatomical structure of the axons. So if the axons are longitudinal fibers, the water molecules have to be arrayed or arranged in a linear fashion. Otherwise, they would have been arranged in a random fashion. So with that, the diffusion tensor imaging is showing the anatomical. So it has been shown by intensive therapy that certain areas become more activated. It has been shown that the new areas become recruited. It has been shown that the white matter tracts are strengthened and new white matter tracts are created. Oral reading, if it is given intensively, can change the areas in the brain. Intensive melodic intonation therapy, the music therapy, if it is given intensively, I'm again emphasizing the word intensive, because it is counterintuitive to the cognitive load theory. I'm emphasizing that part. So it shows good results. And because the neural networks, while they are discrete, yet they are overlapping and interdependent. And that's why we see cross-modality effects. We see communication, neuron and motor function being overlapped. We see the aphasia in sign language, and we see the aphasic alexia and braille readers who are using their fingertips for braille reading. And we are seeing the cross overlap between the language and other cognitive functions. And all these things are important therapeutically. There are cross-modality benefit between writing and spoken practice. So if a person with aphasia is having more problem with spoken but lesser problem with writing, give him a lot of practice in writing. Intensive treatment, his verbal will improve. Cross-modality. Cross-linguistic, a person knows 2 or more than 2 languages. Give him therapy in one language. There would be benefit in other language. So these are the things. And computational models of bilingualism have been developed. I have been working for transliteration across the scripts, across Devanagari and Roman. This practice is helping our patients with difficulty in reading and writing and also verbal expression when we give them a lot of practice for transliteration across the scripts. So as they say, practice makes a man perfect. If aerobics work on our muscles, does that apply to neurobics? The answer is yes, yes, yes. Intensity matters. So there is another something called intensive language action therapy. What matters more, B or A? A is total duration of therapy is spread over many weeks or months. And B, the same duration of therapy compressed in a lesser number of days. What works more? The answer is B. Same duration of therapy compressed in lesser number of days. This is known as intensive language action therapy. It is counterintuitive to the cognitive load theory. You want to flood the patient. You want to inundate the person with lot of commands, lot of practices. So that were some of my comments. I think this part is coming to an end. So I'm making a few comments which are probably beyond my remit. I'm asking the question, is it always beneficial to reduce the cognitive load? Are there not limitations of cognitive load theory? Of course there are. I have read them superficially, but I'm not going to discuss them. It is you people's domain. What are the limitations of cognitive load therapy? I suspect that cognitive load theory probably stems from a so-called liberal intellectual milieu, which is opposed to the concepts of meritocracy, hard work, intelligence, the slate being not blank, and the synergy between inspiration and perspiration. It is just a thought and a provocation. And in the last 5 minutes or so, 10 minutes or so, I will talk about a call, ek ahwan from you people. You must have seen still now that in this blue color, this blue line has been there on many of my slides, but I didn't read it. Help is needed from computer software professionals in digitization of lot of assessment tools and lot of therapy tools. Because today I have the fortune of you people as a captive audience, I thought towards the end of my presentation, I make this call. So there are many roles of you people. I given an abbreviation CTEC. You people play a role of helping us in assessment, in therapy, in rehabilitation, in research. And the merits of digital tools and computerized tools are many. So far, we have been doing all of our work on paper and pencil, on the table, in the offline mode, non-digital mode. We want it all in digital mode. India takes pride in being a information technology superpower, but at practical level, I'm sorry to say, it does not translate into tools being given to we the clinicians by you the computer professionals, which can help our patients. There are many merits of digital tools. They are portable, editable, expandable, multilingual, multi-scriptal, multimodal. We can keep a timer on it. We can have inbuilt scoring. We can have inbuilt analysis. It can be interactive. It can be participatory. It can be administered as teletherapy. It can be administered in a group therapy. It can be individualized. It can be anytime. It can be anywhere. There is a transferability. So many advantages are there, and the tasks are huge and challenging. We need many teams, many startups, many projects, many grants, many research grants, many projects from Department of Science and Technology. Grant application should be right down. We need help in augmentative modes of communication. We need help in creating a aphasia bank at a national level in which we can have computerized recording of performance of persons with aphasia, which can be uploaded, and then we can sync with the international aphasia bank. Project and researchers from various countries are invited to share their information. We want machines or artificial intelligence to supplement the role of a clinician in reading out the instructions. Instead of a speech therapist or a neurologist giving the instruction to the patient, the machine should do the job. Machine should present the instructions on the screen, should present the intelligent selection of stimuli, should record the performance audio and video, and then analyze them for accuracy and reaction time or latency. All audio video recording should be analyzable, and the machine or artificial intelligence should generate a report and a full transcript of the conversation and performance. So we have so many technologies are already there. What we need is a transfer of technology which have originally been developed for so many general and specific purposes. They are there in the market. They are there now for Indian languages. Voice recognition software, text-to-speech software, transliteration software from one script to another, translation software, storage of data and retrieval and data analytics. We need all these technologies are already there. We need them to apply for impairment-based therapy, for holistic therapy. I will urge you to search Google EVA Park and aphasia. Just put these 3 words, EVA Park, aphasia. These are examples of virtual reality and mixed reality in which persons with aphasia can sit in front of their screen and can talk to various avatars on the screen with the help of Maya software, animation softwares. We need some things in Indian context, Indian languages, Indian images, culturally appropriate. This is something from England, UK. And there are many examples of commercial hardware and software which are available in Western countries to help the persons with aphasia. We need Indian tools. Of course, some are coming up. One is the constant therapy at All India Institute of Speech and Hearing in Mysore. Another company in Chennai is Avaz. They have come up with certain software, but mainly for children with developmental disorder, not so much for adults with acquired disorders. So we need digital applications on different platforms, laptop, tablet, smartphone, Android, Apple. We need them in all Indian languages and scripts, and we need them in online mode as well as offline mode. So many things are needed from you people. I have been active in the field of advocacy for aphasia with the help of creating health education and patient education literature on aphasia and other neurological diseases, and creating their support groups in different cities. I need your help in that also. And I think I conclude here. This is me with my collection of devices. So I think I have been